Divorce is known as the second most traumatic life experience after death of a loved one and can trigger similar symptoms of grief.
And here with tips on how to deal with a breakup is divorce coach and author Sarah Davison. So welcome back to the show.
Oh, thanks for having me back.
Yeah, so great to see you again. So let's talk about divorce or even just a breakup, because it can cause a lot of, mental anguish, but it can also cause some physical symptoms, right?
Absolutely, and I think we've all been through heartbreak. It's something that affects absolutely everyone on the planet at least once, and a lot of us more than once, unfortunately. So knowing what to expect and how to cope with it, I think is really important. So obviously it's going to impact your sleep. That's one of the biggest things I hear. People can't get to sleep, or they wake up and they're panicked in the middle of the night, and most of our friends are asleep, right? So we haven't got anyone to talk to, so that can be tough. Also, it affects concentration as well. Not being able to really focus for more than a couple of minutes is really common, so don't worry if that is happening. It is totally normal. But also your ability to parent and to go to work as well. So those are the things that we see, but also the physical aspect, I think, is quite interesting, isn't it? Because it can feel like a real physical pain, even though it's not a physical injury, it's an emotional pain. But some people actually feel it in their heart, and I know that it's that crippling, all-consuming kind of pain. So that does happen. And there's lots of things that happen with that as well. You can go into the either binge eating, a lot of people will eat their feelings as a distraction and a comfort, or they don't eat at all. Their stomach's in knots and they just feel sick about the thought of eating. So there are lots of physical impacts, and the stress hormones as well are like a whole flood. When you've had that high of the oxytocin and the dopamine of being in love, and then you come crashing down with the stress hormones that make you feel sluggish, lousy, really, to be honest, and anxious.
Right. Okay, so you talked about those physical things that we feel, and then the emotional, the stress. So how do we deal with that stress?
Well, there's lots of ways that you can deal with it. I mean, if you're in a relationship, there's something that we call conscious recoupling, and that means that if you're in a relationship and it's okay, but things are going a little bit off track, then it's never too late to do something about it. And I think that's the important one. Knowing that your spouse is not a mind reader. In fact, it's quite amazing how many people think, well, they just don't know how I'm feeling. And I'm like, have you said how you're feeling? Well, no. And I think a lot of partners expect their spouse to know what they're feeling. So it's about being able to express that, but feeling safe to do that. Sometimes we don't feel safe to express how we're truly feeling or our opinions. And a lot of us want to manage the situation so we don't upset anyone. So that's important to look at, I think.
Yeah, I know. We had a couple of tips on there, and basically to make sure the communication lines are open, right? And that's what you were just talking about there. And not to let problems fester.
Yeah. So if problems fester, then they stack up, and then suddenly it can be one small thing that explodes the whole relationship. But I think as stress goes up, communication goes down. And that's one of the things to look out for, because it's normal. We want to retreat, we want to protect ourselves. You maybe don't want to face some of the realities that are going on, but you can't overcome those things unless you sit down and have that open communication, create that safe space. And we expect our partner to take the lead sometimes, but sometimes we have to step up and create that safe space. No blame, not saying you're doing this, it's wrong. Saying, look, this is what's happening, this is how it's making me feel. Is that your intention? Because this is really how I'm feeling. So doing it in a safe way, but also being kind, respectful, and making it fun as well if you can.
Yes. You also say the last tip on that list was keep the love alive. How do you do so?
Yeah, well, I think sometimes the smallest things have the biggest impact, right? I mean, we all like a nice handbag or something like a trip, but, I'm not saying no to that. But I think one of the important things is the small things really matter. So thinking about what your partner really appreciates, you know them better than anyone. So what lights them up, like a Christmas tree when you turn up with, maybe it's a cup of tea in the morning. Maybe it's sort of anticipating that you're running low on some supplies and you go and grab them for your partner. Taking the dog out when it's raining. Those sort of things that show that you genuinely care and you're willing to put yourself out. I think they're key.
That's right. And you have a podcast and help for people that are maybe going through a breakup.
Support groups, right?
Yeah, so we have a podcast called Heartbreak to Happiness, which gives a lot of free advice and tips. I also set up online support groups, so people can dial in and get help from coaches that have been through my coach training school. So it's support in a group where you can find your tribe, other people going through similar things, but get really quality advice as well.
Yeah, it's so important to have a community when you're going through something like this.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
That's right. And for more advice and tips, you can visit her website at sarah.davison.com.